Good evening, America, and welcome to this Just the News, Real America's Voice special report on the ballot, Open Borders. I'm your host, John Solomon. Tonight, in partnership with our sponsor, Heritage Action for America, we're going to explore the ways in which our southern border remains insecure and poses a major national security risk. While the Biden administration has had nearly 2 years to work with their party's congressional majority to fix our nation's border, not much progress has been made. More than 2 million illegal aliens have crossed our borders this year alone. A record 800 have died trying, and about 90 people stopped by border agents had ties to terrorism. And that doesn't even include all of the migrants that got to the interior of the country and then committed crimes. Despite the ongoing crisis, the Democratic Party, led by Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, have been plowing ahead with other priorities, looking to hold on to the respective legislative majorities in November. As Americans' frustrations with the crisis rise, congressional Republicans have rolled out their Commitment to America agenda, a plan that closely resembles former House Speaker Newt Gingrich's Contract with America of 1994. In this plan, securing our nation's borders, combating illegal immigration, increasing public safety officers, and defending America's sovereignty from all enemies, foreign and domestic, are at the top of the list. The open borders is unquestionably on the November ballot. Over this next hour, we'll be joined by leading security experts like Border Agent Union President Brandon Judd, candidates in border states like Arizona's Blake Masters, and the former Secretary of the Homeland Security Department, Chad Wolf. As always, and in concert with our partners at Heritage Action for America, we are committed to delivering the facts and then let you make up your own mind. Now, our first guest tonight has over 25 years of experience in the immigration and homeland security space. She's worked at the Department of Homeland Security on policy, and most recently as acting Deputy Chief of Staff. Lora Reis joins us from the Heritage Foundation in her capacity as their Director of Border Security and Immigration Center. Lora, so great to have you on the show tonight.
Thanks for having me on, John.
I want to start with something our Vice President said just a few days ago. There seems to be a disconnect between what Americans see with their eyes and what the Biden White House says. Take a listen to this.
The border is secure, but we also have a broken immigration system, in particular over the last 4 years before we came in, and it needs to be fixed.
We're going to have 2 million people cross this border for the first time ever. You're confident this border is secure?
We have a secure border in that is a priority for any nation, including ours and our administration. But there are still a lot of problems that we are trying to fix, given the deterioration that happened over the last 4 years.
Laura, I want to ask 2 things. 1, is she giving an honest assessment? And 2, can they keep blaming the Trump administration for today's problems?
No, she's not giving an honest assessment. She seems to be hypnotized when she's saying the border's secure. It's not convincing in the least. And it's just yet another attempt by this administration to say, don't believe your lying eyes. They have now been in office almost 2 years, and they are breaking our immigration system. They have thrown the border doors completely open. And so to say they inherited a broken system is untrue. They inherited the most secure border we have had in decades. And yet they want to use the excuse of the prior administration to continue their very bad policies.
Yeah, it's remarkable. You were part of that team that created one of the most secure borders in American history. We had record low illegal migration at the end of the Trump presidency. Republicans now have several ideas in the Commitment for America to try to address this, to try to bring us back to the Trump era. Your thoughts on the new Commitment with America?
Well, we were pleased to see the Republicans come out with this Commitment to America. We definitely need strong conservatives in the next Congress to not just introduce legislation that will actually solve the problems we're facing, but to see those bills through to passage, and then to pressure the president to sign what will be a very reasonable bill if, in fact, he wants to solve the problem. It isn't just a matter of giving money to hire more Border Patrol agents. Those are certainly necessary. But it is also continuing the construction of the wall and technology that is needed between the ports, not just at the ports, as President Biden, as well as funding ICE sufficiently to work on interior enforcement. We're going to need a lot more detentions and a lot more deportations. And we need Republicans who are comfortable with that and aren't going to clam up once the left inevitably labels them a racist for talking about these policies that are so important to Americans.
Yeah, it really is. In fact, Heritage did a study just a few weeks ago. 61% of Americans believe we should go back to the Trump administration's policies. It seems like the Biden administration is literally driving into the headwind of Americans' will.
That's right. Americans want to feel safe in their communities, and they simply aren't. This issue of the open border policies collides with the defund the police movement, and Americans see crime rising all over, whether that is from gotaways who have crossed that border during this administration, or other serial criminals who see that there just aren't consequences if they commit more crime. Even if they get arrested and are detained, they're going to be quickly released. And then they go on to commit more crime. So lack of consequences endangers Americans, not just in the immigration context, but also in the public safety context.
Yeah, it's really remarkable. And you've got fentanyl coming in because the drug cartels have really complete control of the border. 100,000 plus Americans in the last year poisoned to death by that extraordinary chemical. And then you have these other tragic episodes. You see a dad in Florida murdered by the young person he took in. They thought he was a teenager, turned out to be an adult. Deputy sheriff being killed, crashes killing people. In the interior of America now, people are really feeling the impact of this illegal immigration wave, aren't they?
They are, unfortunately. And what people see on the limited media that covers the border are women and children mostly getting off the buses that are being transported around the country. What people aren't seeing are the military-aged men dressed in head-to-toe camouflage, carrying very full backpacks, sneaking across the border. But some game cameras are catching images of them, and they are crossing day or night. They do not want to be caught. We have to assume all of them have ill intentions given how they are crossing. And that is what is resulting in the 100,000 plus overdose deaths of Americans due to drugs, particularly fentanyl, but also terrorist threats and these serial criminals who then go on to kill, such as the deputy in Florida. These are needless crimes and deaths. These people should not be here, and therefore their victims should still be alive.
Yeah, absolutely. Completely avoidable crimes. Lora, we got about 45 seconds left. Just real quickly, everyday Americans, they sometimes feel overwhelmed. Now, this is Washington's problems, but this is an election where the grassroots of America can make a difference. What's the message that you have for Americans who want to fix this border?
They need to be loud and every day to their elected officials at every level, local, state, and government, and keep applying pressure to shut down this border, to defund the Biden administration's processing of illegal immigrants into this country, and to secure that border and secure Americans' lives and our sovereignty as a nation.
Yeah, well, Lora, the work you do at Heritage is amazing. Everybody should go out and check the Security and Immigration Center out. Chock full of great facts and policy solutions. Great to have you on the show to kick us off tonight.
Thank you.
All right, folks, we're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, the former Secretary of the Homeland Security Department, Chad Wolf, will be joining us. He has a lot to say about that border, the way it used to look and the way it looks now, right after this. Welcome back, everybody. It wasn't that long ago when we had a secure border, a low number of terrorists coming across the border, not many people being dying because we had a border strategy that worked. And that our next guest was at the forefront of helping President Trump put that strategy into place. He's the former Homeland Security Secretary, Chad Wolf, and he joins us right now. Mr. Secretary, great to have you on the show.
Well, thanks for having me. Good to be here.
I want to talk a little bit about numbers because numbers tell the real story here. 2.1 million illegal crossings already this year. I believe 85 terrorists or people with suspected terrorist ties have come across. 12 in August alone, an all-time record. More than 800 people dying as they were trying to cross the border, 3 times what it was in the Trump administration. We're in a crisis, but the White House is saying we're doing a great job. Where are the American people on this?
Yeah, it's really remarkable what the White House and the administration continue to double down, not only on a failed strategy at that border, but also on failed messaging. They continue to say that the border is closed and it's secure and everything's under control, nothing to see here. But the numbers that you outlined, as well as a whole host of other numbers, tell a far different story. And it's really a story that's unfolding, and it's a crisis. It's not only a humanitarian crisis, we have a security crisis going on down there, and there's not a lot of not a lot of attention being focused on it. But as you said, there are more and more migrants dying in that desert and on that river than ever before because of the policies of this administration. So I think it's good that we're having a national debate, right, about it. You have big city mayors and you have the left now talking about this issue, but they're only really talking about it because it's shown up on their doorstep, whether that's been in New York City and DC and Chicago or Martha's Vineyard. Absent, action being taken by the governor of Texas or Florida, the left continues not to talk about this. They continue to be silent on it. Where is the president? Where are the vice president? They have a crisis. They should be on national television, prime time, outlining the crisis and outlining the steps that this administration is taking. Where is the strategy? If they have one, I have no idea what it is.
Yeah, it's really remarkable. And meanwhile, the very people they say they're trying to give an opportunity to are being victimized all the way on the journey here. They're put into the hands of cartels. Women are repeatedly raped. People make risky ventures across the river. They end up drowning, I think 8 in one day very recently. Literally, they're imposing on the very people they say they're trying to help the most inhumane way of coming into the country. Do you think everyday Americans are beginning to grasp that this actually has a consequence, not just for all of us here, but for the very people that the Democrats say they're trying to support?
Well, I think the American people understand that what occurs at that border does not stay at the border. So I think that first and foremost, they're impacted most probably by the fentanyl and opioid crisis that's hitting every community across this country. Second, I think they realize the number of individuals coming across that border is unsustainable for the United States. It's unsustainable for those border communities. I don't know if the population has a good understanding of the humanitarian crisis that's going on down there, because if you don't live in those communities or you don't talk to law enforcement down there, I think it's hard to grasp what's going on. Since the federal government's not enforcing border security and the laws along that border, the slack that has to be taken up is by that local law enforcement. So I talked to several sheriffs yesterday saying that their resources are stretched thin. Not only are they arresting more individuals, illegal aliens, because of crimes that are being committed, but they are also picking up and discovering more and more, unfortunately, individuals that have perished in the desert, particularly in Arizona and other places, because of the policies of this administration. Whether that is getting out to the American people sort of in a comprehensive way, I think we continue to try to talk about it. But when you have large portions of the media refusing to really focus on that, I think that tells you all you need to know.
Yeah, it's a complete blackout on most days. It's just extraordinary. In fact, there was more concerned about the 50 illegal aliens that were dropped at the door at Martha's Vineyard than the 50 who died in the back of a truck because of these incredible conditions that they're doing. Fentanyl, you mentioned it a little bit, the number of pills being seized and the lethality of them going up by record amounts. It affects every community in America. Is there anything that the Border Patrol has been allowed to do to try to stop this, or both of their hands really tied behind their back right now?
Well, what I'll tell you is trying to obviously not only detect and then apprehend illegal narcotics coming into the United States, even before the fentanyl crisis, was a challenge. We need more technology along that border, particularly at our legal ports of entry, what we call non-intrusive technology, to make sure that we're scanning vehicles and we're scanning individuals coming across that border. But look, the humanitarian crisis and the border crisis and the human trafficking that we see is tied to the fentanyl crisis. It's tied in the sense that the Mexican cartels are making millions of dollars a day off of smuggling individuals across that border, and therefore they're able to invest that money back into their enterprise to peddle more and more of this fentanyl across the border. So you've got to attack one, and if you attack one, which is the border crisis and the human trafficking, then inevitably you will have an impact of what's going on the illegal narcotics side. But you're absolutely correct. We need to get serious about this Mexican cartels. They are killing Americans every single day. And why I love, we can talk about Ukraine and we can talk about places overseas, but let's start focusing on what's killing Americans day in and day out. And that's not only the illegal narcotics coming across, but it's also the border security crisis that we see today.
Yeah, there's no doubt. There was a pretty dramatic moment just a few days ago. The Texas governor signing an executive order declaring that the cartels moving that fentanyl, moving all of those illegal humans into our country are terrorist organizations. Asked President Biden to do the same. The pressure on the Biden administration is growing. Do you think if a Republican Congress is put in place that we might actually see a designation like that?
Well, you certainly could. I mean, we were certainly talking about it at the end of the Trump administration. I think there's a lot of things to take into consideration. It's not just naming them a foreign terrorist organization, but what does that mean? What does that allow you to do? And then what are the drawbacks from that as well? So there's a couple of things to really look at, but I think that this needs to have a serious evaluation, whether the National Security Council and others inside the Biden administration are taking a hard look at this and really coming up with a credible analysis of what needs to occur here needs to be done. I'm hopeful that they're going to do that, because sitting back and just saying, well, the cartels have always operated there and there's nothing that we can do. They're inside Mexico. They're not in the United States. It's no longer acceptable. The status quo that we've had for the past several decades is no longer acceptable. We need to take action. I think we need to take specific action against the cartels, whether designating them as an FTO, a foreign terrorist organization, that may be part of it, or we may be able to take some separate action outside of that as well.
Yeah, people are crying for just that action. They remember the days that long ago when you were in charge and these things weren't as big an issue. Mr. Secretary, great honor to have you on today. Thanks for joining us.
Great, thank you.
You as well. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back after these commercial messages. Welcome back, everybody. We've been hearing from problem solvers trying to address the frontline issues of an open southern border. Now we're going to hear from a man running in a state that is overwhelmed by illegal migrants coming across that border. Joining us right now, the Republican nominee for U.S. Senate in the great state of Arizona, Blake Masters. Blake, great to have you on the show.
Great to see you, John. Thank you.
I want to start with the extraordinary images of watching all of Martha's Vineyard in the last few weeks melt down over a mere 50 illegal migrants dropped at their door. You've got 50,000 to 100,000 coming into Arizona every couple of weeks. What effect does it have when you see liberals suddenly melt in the face of just a few illegal migrants?
Well, this is just so characteristic of the modern Democratic Party, of the modern progressives who are in charge, right? They have these horrible policies, but usually they don't bear the costs of them. They expect the rest of America to pay the price and to deal with the fallout. And so it's just astonishing. You know, DeSantis sends 50 migrants to Martha's Vineyard, and they declare a humanitarian crisis. Never mind this humanitarian crisis we've had here on the border in Arizona for years now. All of a sudden, 50 show up in Martha's Vineyard, and it's a complete disaster. John, I think they mobilized the National Guard.
They did.
The Martha's Vineyard, wealthy, moneyed Democratic elite, they couldn't even bear to have these illegal aliens sharing their island for 24 hours. And they mobilized the National Guard and deported them immediately. So, of course, it's just more champagne socialism, left-wing hypocrisy. We're used to that. But I'm grateful as a candidate here in Arizona because now the media is finally talking about the border crisis. And they finally get to see what people in Arizona have been dealing with every single day for a long time, especially under Joe Biden and his failed presidency.
Well, speaking of that media, a few short weeks ago, they were writing off your campaign. Now you are neck and neck. You're moving up in the polls quickly. You've had a relentless focus on pinning down your opponent, Senator Mark Kelly, on the border on all the issues that are Joe Biden. He's really struggling to embrace or even define what his president stands for, isn't he?
Well, that's right. And Biden is incredibly unpopular in Arizona. He's incredibly unpopular most everywhere in the country. Mark Kelly, he's in this awkward spot because he promised Arizonans he would be independent. But once in DC, he's just voted in lockstep almost 100% of the time for Biden's agenda. So he's Biden's sidekick, really. He's Biden's most loyal foot soldier in the United States Senate. All of a sudden, it comes time to run for re-election. Biden's not popular. And Mark Kelly, he's got to do that awkward thing where he contorts himself to try to put some distance between him and Biden. Actually, no, most Arizonans, they don't like Biden. They don't like the open border, the double-digit inflation, all the problems Biden's caused. And when they learn that Mark Kelly just surrendered his independence and is voting for all these crazy Biden policies, they want to make a change. So I got to get that message out. As we've got that message out, the race has tightened. And I think in November, Arizonans are going to send Mark Kelly home and get someone in there who's actually going to be independent and check Joe Biden.
He had this awkward moment where he was asked, why don't you hold out more and do like what Senator Kristen Sinema does and get more for Arizona? And he said something to the effect of, I don't like conflict. I'm a get along, go along sort of guy. That had to create an incredible moment in Arizona politics, didn't it?
And he caught himself. He said, well, now look, hey, I'm not in the business of holding up And then he caught himself because he was telling the truth. And he was like, uh-oh, that's an uncomfortable truth. He's not in the business of holding up the Democratic agenda. He's in the business of rubber stamping it. And then he pivoted to some mindless, safe consultant drivel. But he's shown us who he is. He's not the independent that he promised he was in 2020. Now we have a 2-year track record. And again, if people like Joe Biden, if they think that the open border and the double-digit inflation and the rising crime, if people like that, they have a candidate. They can vote to reelect Mark Kelly. But if they want to make a change, if they want safe streets, if they want a actual secure border, if they want 2% inflation instead of 20%, they should make a change and vote for me.
Yeah, and listen, it's so easy when you are in Martha's Vineyard to look at the migrant crisis, to look at the open border as just an inconvenience. All right, we'll send them to the military base, get them away. But there are deadly consequences to the open border. We're going to have approximately 900 migrants die crossing into the United States. You had some drowning in rivers there recently. But there's also every 8.5 minutes, an American is dying from a fentanyl poisoning, from fentanyl that came across that border. This is a lethal crisis, and it doesn't seem like anyone on the Democratic side even wants to mention the word fentanyl. You're really doubling down and educating the Arizonans about the lethal nature of this, right?
That's right. And I see you're showing the rainbow fentanyl on the screen. You know, the cartel, they're dressing this stuff up to look like candy, to fool children, right? In the weeks before Halloween. Like, that is just evil. And John, I'm glad you said poisonings. You know, a lot of people say overdoses, and maybe technically that's correct, but this is actually poison. You know, one pill can kill a child. One pill is killing Arizona teenagers. And apparently it's controversial. I said the other day on a radio program that I think Senator Mark Kelly should have to attend the funerals of these children in Arizona who have died from fentanyl and look a mother in the eye when she's lost her child to this poison and explain why exactly he couldn't bother to lift a finger to give us border security here in Arizona. 95% of the fentanyl in our country is coming through our southern border with Mexico. It's killing so many young people in America, and the Biden administration is not doing a single thing to stop it.
Yeah, and you went to the border. You did some really amazing stuff with video. You actually show people what it's like at Yuma and other places where you can walk through the holes in the wall. And you also talked about something that I don't think a lot of people outside of the border states realize. These illegal migrants, they ripping up their citizenship documentation because it makes it easier for them to stay here under the Biden rules. There's a lot of planning that goes into this illegal migration, isn't it?
That's right. And, you know, we got to the border the other day, last week at 7 a.m. In Yuma, just in time to see a group of 35 illegal aliens walk right over. And just walked right over. In that particular group, I think there were Indians, there were Peruvians, and folks from Cuba. And, you know, that happens hourly in Yuma. Yuma gets an average of 50 illegals coming over every single hour. That's about 1,000 a day. That really adds up, 50 an hour. But Martha's Vineyard freaks out if they get 50 one time.
Yeah, it's just mind-boggling to even think of. Real quickly, you have a comprehensive plan. You're put all the resources in. Can you give us a quick overview of what your plan is to close up the border?
Absolutely. I believe in the border wall. I think we need to finish it, right? The wall is a key piece of technology. Of course, it's just one piece. we need a lot more Border Patrol. We need to support our Border Patrol. They need more resources, more manpower. I'm also a tech guy. Yeah, I think we need drones. We need infrared, thermal imaging cameras. We need basically to map every inch of the border to know and see, have a bird's eye view of who's coming across. And then there's also politics, policy, right? Remain in Mexico. Those Trump administration policies worked. Nothing was perfect, but man, it was pretty darn good relative to what we have now. So let's start by re-implementing those successful policies like Remain in Mexico, and we can start driving the number of illegal crossings back towards zero.
An all-of-government approach. That's what Americans are asking for. I know all Americans' eyes are going to be on Arizona this November, seeing if you can unseat Senator Mark Kelly. Blake Masters, great honor to have you on the show today. Thank you so much.
Thanks, John. We're going to do it. Thank you.
All righty, folks. Don't go anywhere, because when we come back, we'll be joined by the very woman currently working to unseat a Democrat that has represented the U.S.-Mexico border district in the Lone Star State of Texas. We'll be right back with other candidates right after this. Welcome back, everybody. You may have heard of this next guest due to her very strong criticism of President Biden's handling of the open border at the southern border. After all, Cassie Garcia is running in the 28th Congressional District of Texas. That represents a large chunk of our southern border. She joins us now to discuss why this very border issue is at the top of her constituents' mind as we go to the November elections. Cassie, you have an eyewitness every day to what it's like to have 2 million illegal migrants coming across that border. Tell us a little bit about what you and your constituents in South Texas are seeing.
You know, I grew up, I was raised down in the Rio Grande Valley for the past 37 years, and this is the worst I've ever seen the crisis, the humanitarian crisis on our southern border. I am the proud wife of a Border Patrol agent who has served this great country for 26 years. He has also never seen the border a mess. And we talk about the amount of fentanyl coming across our border, the amount of people that are dying, 2 million apprehensions, over 800 people have died crossing the river, the dangerous journey. Women have been raped, have been murdered, and the administration is quiet. The left is quiet. No one's talking about it. But you know what? I live and breathe this every single day, and enough is enough. And people are frustrated. The people of District 28 are sick and tired of the Biden administration ignoring the crisis on our southern border.
Yeah, this has been a district that's been in Democrat hands for a long time. Henry Cuellar is a current holder of the office, but there seems to be a very significant change underway. You seem to have lit a fire. People are very excited about your candidacy. Talk about getting people to open their minds to considering a Republican and trying to get this situation solved at the border finally.
Yeah, so this district has been Democrat controlled for over 110 years. So they've never had a Republican ever serve this great district. The opponent, Henry Cuellar, has been in office since I've been in kindergarten. And right now he's under a criminal investigation for corruption. The National Border Patrol Council, who's always endorsed Henry Cuellar, has endorsed me in this race because they know I will get the job done. Also, at the end of the day, Henry Cuellar, his first vote is always for Nancy Pelosi, and he voted against infrastructure for our southern border. And the Border Patrol agents need they need technology, they need personnel, they need infrastructure to help them do their jobs. And that's what I plan to do. People are ready for a new voice in Washington, D.C. And that's why I can't wait till November 8th till we flip the seat red and show Washington, D.C. that we are Americans. I'm running for Congress to defend faith, family, and freedom, and we are hardworking. This district, John, is 80% Hispanic. Hispanics do not want to see an open border. They want a strong and secure border, and we support legal immigration, not illegal immigration.
Yeah, such an important thing. All the polling shows that, and yet the Democratic Party doesn't seem to be getting that message. Being married to a Border Patrol agent, you get to see the toll that occurs every day on the great men and women of that agency. Give us a little sense of how overwhelmed they are, how little support they get, and their current feelings about what's going on at the border.
And you know what? I had, the morale is so low. Under the previous administration, you talk to the Border Patrol agents, they were excited to do their job. They had somebody who had their back that allowed them to do their job. And when they apprehended somebody, they were getting sent back immediately. Now under this administration, there is no policy. They have, people are coming in and every single day, each sector is seeing about 2,000 migrants every single day. That takes a toll on the agent and their families as well, because they didn't sign up to do this. They didn't sign up to allow people to come in our country. There's law and order. Right now, this administration is not enforcing laws on the books. In fact, I had my husband, he was off on Saturday. I took him with me on the campaign trail. And as we were driving down to Laredo, we witnessed a bailout. And he goes, oh, look, there's Air Marine up in the air. And we saw a bailout. For those who don't know what a bailout is, basically people that are running from the law. Right. And as soon as they hit a fence, they run out of the vehicles. And you either got DPS and Border Patrol going in to apprehend those individuals. And then on the way back, we saw in Normandy a busload. I call those white buses, customer buses. And there was about 150 migrants getting ready to get apprehended, processed, and released. And so it takes a toll. And it's hard because they signed up to protect our borders. Border security is national security. And the fact that this administration is not talking about it, you got Kamala Harris, who's going to be in Austin, Texas 2 weeks from now to do a fundraiser, and she's our border czar and has yet to visit the southern border. And so at the end of the day, we need this administration to step up, to do their job. At the end of the day, we are going to take back the House, and we're going to make sure that when we take back the House, we're going to ensure that we have security hearings. And I can't wait to have a hearing with AOC, because the left right now, there's no outcry from the left. No. And it's unbelievable and hypocrisy that they're not saying a thing about what is happening and that we're being overrun. It's an invasion, what we're seeing on our southern border.
Yeah, it really is amazing. There was a big moment in the last few days. Texas Governor Greg Abbott declared several of the Mexican drug cartels to be foreign terrorist organizations for the first time, and he pleaded with President Biden to do the same. This fentanyl is like a chemical attack. It's not just drug running. It is killing people, poisoning them, even with a single dose. Now they're making this stuff to maybe fool children into picking it up. How important is it that we get a national declaration of Mexican drug cartels as foreign terrorist organizations?
I applaud Governor Abbott for stepping up on so many levels. One, for also, sending his troops, the border, the Texas troopers, game wardens out there on the river and their boats out there to secure our southern border, but also to lead in the front as labeling them as cartels, as terrorists. That's what they are. They're making billions of dollars every year on harvesting on these young people, folks that are coming to our country. People are paying between $3,000 to $5,000 just to come across, and when they get sent back, they're going to have to raise up some more money. So the cartels are making a lot of money. And so I applaud this administration. In fact, when I get to Congress, when we flip the seat red, that's one of the first things, I know Congressman Chip Roy has introduced a bill to do that, to highlight labeling the cartels as a terrorist foreign organization. Right. And I plan to do the same thing, introducing that in when I get to Congress. It's so important. And we are being overrun by the cartels, and the administration needs to wake up and needs to see what is happening. It's unbelievable, John, that the fact that we're seeing this every single day, and it's not fair to the Hispanic communities that are having to bear the burden of using taxpayer dollars to bus these migrants out of the area. And you've got Martha's Vineyard up in arms because they received over 50 migrants. What about the communities of Eagle Pass, Del Rio, the Rio Grande Valley, El Paso? It's not fair to them, and even Laredo.
It's dangerous as well. Well, Cassie, we're real excited to be watching your race. It's going to be one of the bellwethers on November 8th. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much. So honored to be with you today.
All right, folks, don't go anywhere. We've got a lot more conversation coming up about the border right after these commercial messages. Welcome back, everybody. Brandon Judd serves as the president of the National Border Patrol Council and has been sounding the alarm on the very issues we've been discussing tonight. He's been talking about it for 2 years. Most of what he has predicted has come true. Joining us right now is Brandon Judd. Brandon, great to have you on the show.
John, it's always good to be with you. Thank you.
I want to start, there is a lot of media coverage that demeans the Border Patrol, sometimes even calls some of the information the Border Patrol puts out disinformation when it's not. the morale of our agents, the guys and women on the front lines, what is that like right now?
It's lower than I've ever seen it. You know, we put on the uniform, want to go out there and protect the American people, and we're just not allowed to do that right now. When you look at the total number of people that are getting away, that are evading apprehension, it's a very scary situation right now. And it's very demoralizing knowing that we can't do the job that we want to do to protect our fellow citizens.
Yeah, and one of the things I know you see often are migrants who get themselves in serious trouble, security or safety-wise, they drown. We're closing in, I think, on 900 deaths for the year. Your team is out there rescuing people every day, but we're putting people in harm's way by creating the illusion that they can come in across the rivers and through the cartels, aren't we? It's a very unsafe trip, isn't it?
It is. I'm going to go back to James Epling in Yuma, Arizona. He went into the river to save migrants from China that were in the United States illegally. He lost his life. He left behind 4 young children and of course, a wife. And so, yeah, we put ourselves in harm's way. We willingly do that. We want to, again, protect the American people, and we want to protect those people that are crossing the border illegally, even though they are committing a crime. We just don't see the help from the Democrats in allowing us to do that job, to protect those individuals. In fact, they're encouraging these people to put themselves in harm's way. They're encouraging them to cross the Rio Grande River and to be swept away, young children being swept away out of the arms of mothers at times. That happened twice last month. And so, yeah, it's a very dangerous situation. And the Democrats just seem like they don't care about the sanctity of life, to be honest.
Yeah, it's really stunning. And the numbers don't lie. This is going to be the most deadly year ever for crossing the border. And no one wants to talk about that.
By far.
Yeah, by far.
It's going to be the deadliest year by far. I mean, when you look at it prior to President Biden taking office, the most deaths that we ever had was a little over 300. Now we're right at 800. Yeah, it's the most dangerous situation we've ever seen by far. And again, I'm going to go back to that point. The Democrats do not care. They give it lip service, but their actions are far from caring.
It is just amazing to see the lack of attention and the ignorance that's being applied. I want to take you to an issue that a lot of people don't talk about. There have been reports by some members of Congress who were briefed by Homeland that there's large numbers of Venezuelans being emptied from prisons. But whether that turns out to be true or not, the fact that a large number of the people, 5 to 10% of the people you encounter, are people that have had serious past criminal offenses. We're getting bad people constantly coming across the border, aren't we?
Yeah, we are. And this is the scariest thing about border security. When you're dealing with people that have criminal records here in the United States, and we don't know what their criminal records are in their own countries. If Venezuela is emptying out their jails and these people cross the border illegally, we're not going to know about that record, that criminal history that they have in Venezuela. And if we don't know about it, we're ultimately going to release them into the United States. That is a very scary proposition for the American people. And again, it goes back to border security, whether or not this administration is going to give us the tools necessary to protect the homeland, to protect our fellow citizens. And they're just not doing it right now. And if this actually comes to fruition, it's going to be very scary to see what the outcome is. We might not know what the outcome is immediately, but we will ultimately hear of all of the stories of these criminals coming into the United States and the crimes that they will commit against our own citizens. And again, that's the scariest aspect of border security.
Yeah, we're starting to see some of those heinous crimes already. A father in Florida killed when he thought he was taking in a 17-year-old who turned out to be a 20-something-year-old and killed the father. The
10-year-old, the 10-year-old in Ohio
right.
that was raped multiple times, was impregnated by somebody. And by the way, that is a person that evaded apprehension. We didn't even take that individual into custody. When he was arrested for that rape of that 10-year-old girl and he was fingerprinted, he never showed up in any of our databases, which means he was able to evade apprehension. He was one of the gotaways. Again, very scary situation.
Yeah, it really is. I want to talk about something that is creating a death toll on our side of the border. Fentanyl coming in at record amounts, being made to look like candy. The cartels seem to have a significant amount of operational control at the border now. What do you see? How large is that operational control to facilitate human and drug trafficking?
They're able to dictate to us what our operations are going to be. All they have to do is flood our resources with large groups of illegal border crossers, pull our agents out of the field, create artificial gaps, cross our higher value products. That's the fentanyl, that's the criminal aliens, that's the aliens from special interest countries. But like you said, the fentanyl is one of the major issues that we're dealing with today in the United States. Those pills right there are being packaged for children. For children, that is going to cause death of a great number of our children. Right now, the leading cause of death in the United States among 18-year-olds to 45-year-olds is fentanyl overdose. This is something that's coming from our southwest border. It's being facilitated by China. The precursors come into Mexico. It's being manufactured by the cartels and crossing our border. Again, transnational criminal organizations, something that we didn't see prior to the Biden administration.
Some Republicans are beginning to call it chemical warfare. What do you think of that assessment of it?
I agree. And it should be. Unless we're willing to define the problem, we're never going to come up with the solutions. We have to talk about whether or not this is a crisis. If this administration will not say that we have a border crisis, they're not going to come up with solutions. And that's what we've seen. No new programs, operations, policies, nothing new to help get the border under control.
Yeah. We got about 60 seconds left. Brandon, what do the men and women of the Border Patrol need from our government right now? What's the solution for them at this very moment?
Policy. We don't need to pass this on to the taxpayer. We don't need additional resources. We need policy. If we have the proper policy, we can secure the border. That's what we're pushing for. That's what we want. We don't want to put this burden on the American taxpayer.
Yeah, it makes so much sense. I think people today understand why so many of the men and women of the Border Patrol really appreciate you, Brandon. You give us straight truth, straight facts, and solutions, something Washington isn't giving us very much of on the border. Great honor to have you on the show today, sir.
Thank you, John. Always good to talk to you.
You as well. All right, folks, we're nearing the end of our hour tonight. However, we do have one more guest that will speak to this very issue, drop statistics, and propose solutions. We'll be right back after these messages. Welcome back, everybody. Our next guest has an extraordinary finger on the pulse of America. Janae Strocki serves as the director of grassroots for Heritage Action for America and has been a leading voice on the southern border crisis, as well as having a great sense of how that crisis is troubling everyday Americans. Janae, great to have you back on the show.
Thanks for having me. Always a pleasure.
It is such an extraordinary moment when you see the majority party in power in Washington completely disconnected from an issue Americans say we want fixed, and the Democrats don't seem to be interested in fixing it. Talk about that disconnect and how it could play out in the November election.
That's exactly right. You know, a disconnect might be the nice way of putting it. I think they're systematically dismantling every tool we have to protect our borders and stop the flow of illegal immigrants that has been absolutely devastating to the American people. I could list off a number of issues that it's caused for the American people. The fentanyl overdose is now the leading cause of deaths for people ages 18 to 45. We have 240,000 illegal immigrants caught in 1 month. 1 month, that's 8,000 per day. I mean, they are flooding across the border. And because the Biden administration has dismantled all of the tools we have and basically said, come on over. If you come, you're going to get to stay. So this is the number one issue, long-term issue facing the American people, and it needs to be the number one priority for the incoming congressional members. If the Republicans retake the House and Senate, this needs to be their priority. This is a mandate from the American people, and all of our numbers are showing that this is something every American is being impacted by.
Oh, yeah, there's no doubt about it. And the Commitment with America that was rolled out by the House Republicans last week clearly has a big focus on the border crisis. Another place where a lot of progress has been made in the absence of federal action are the states exercising their own rights to do things. I think Heritage has put together some great ideas. What are some of the most interesting things states are doing to fill the gap where Washington has failed?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And there's a lot that states can do, but I think that taking an all hands on deck approach to this is going to be vital. We need to see that leadership from Washington, D.C. as well. So Heritage Action and the Heritage Foundation and a group of other people have put out a list of recommendations and policies that both the states and the federal government can put into place. I mean, the asylum system is being completely abused. That should be one of the first things they fix and fill the gaps on. We have seen those numbers skyrocket. We should also reinstate the Remain in Mexico policy. This is a policy that Trump had put into place that basically said if you're seeking asylum, the country that you go through first is the country you should stay in. So if immigrants are going through Mexico and are truly seeking asylum, they should be able to seek care in Mexico before coming to America. But unfortunately, what's happening is the system's being abused. These illegal immigrants are not actually seeking asylum. And then catch and release is another policy that should be ended. So these illegal immigrants, many of which are terrorists, MS-13 gang members, just a dozen of them have been caught recently. Even came across as previously convicted of murder in Tennessee. These are the illegal immigrants that are coming back across our border. And because of catch and release, they're caught at the border and then released so that they can go to a court date later on, which of course they don't actually show up at. So those are the first two things that should be addressed. And then of course we need to offer more funding to Customs and Border Patrol, more resources, and Secretary Mayorkas needs to be impeached. That should be something the House takes on as well. He has failed to uphold his basic duties in this position, and that would be a step that the House can take to show the Biden administration you don't get to mess around. You do your job, or you need to get out.
Yeah, no doubt. That's a message that voters need to send. When you look out over the last few weeks, we've been talking on this show about all the times that Democrats had illegal migrants bust to their community, like, oh, not here. We don't want them in our backyard. Sorry, too much of a crisis for us. Do you think that's going to play out in the election and how?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've seen some pretty theatrical displays of that recently with Martha's Vineyard, and the hypocrisy is so clear. The reality is that every state is a border state in America. They're not just staying in Texas or Arizona or some of these other border states. They're being moved into all of our states, and the elite Democrats need to realize that. If they're coming into their vacation towns, they don't seem to like that very much. So this is absolutely a key issue for the upcoming election. Members are going to have to answer on it no matter what party you're from. I hope that the American people, and I believe that the American people will hold the Democrat Party accountable for this, as they have completely ignored their responsibilities and have dismissed the crisis that they're seeing before their very eyes. This is hurting every American across the country, and I believe they will show that when they vote in November. But they'll also be sending a really clear message to Republicans. If a new majority comes in the House, this is a message from the American people. They are demanding that you do something about this crisis, stop the illegal immigration, fill the gaps, fix the system. 72% of Americans have responded and said that they want the border to be secured. The flood of illegal immigrants has to stop. Where I'm talking about numbers, those are just the numbers we know. What about the number of illegal immigrants who have gotten away? Many who are gang members and causing much damage to our communities. So this is a leading issue for the election. And I do believe that we will see the impact of that.
Those gotaways, a lot of people mentioned them tonight. It's a really scary situation. We got about a minute left, Janae. Real quickly, someone's listening. They want to do something. There's 40 days left of the election. What can they do with Hoffa, with others, to make a difference going into the final 40 days of this midterm election?
Absolutely. Get involved in any way that you can. Join Heritage Action Sentinel. You can text Sentinel to 51776. We have weekly strategies about what action items you can take. You also can volunteer for a campaign. Door knock. We're doing door knocking at Heritage Action as well. There are a number of things that you can do, whether it's giving your time, your money, calling your members. Please continue to call your members even prior to the election. Let them know right now, while they're still campaigning, this is an issue you care about. This is an issue that you expect them to do something about and that you will hold them accountable for.
Yeah, well, we've seen Heritage Action's work, whether it was on Title IX, whether it was on election integrity. Grassroots really does make a difference. Janae, great job with all that you're doing out in the field. And thanks for joining us tonight.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Great to have you. All right, folks, believe it or not, that wraps up this very important special report on border security. As we close, I want to thank our sponsor and partner, Heritage Action for America, for making this conversation possible, as well as our friends here at Real America's Voice for allowing us to reach out directly to you, the viewers. One unmistakable message from tonight's experts is that border security is without question on the ballot this fall, and you have the ability to be part of the solution just by voting. Now, we'll be right back here tomorrow night at 6 p.m., where I'll be rejoined by my amazing co-host, Amanda Head, to bring you more breaking news and the latest headlines from Just the News, Not Noise. Until then, I ask that God continue to bless you and this extraordinary country. Thanks again for tuning in, and have a great night.